All right, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Better Fishing with Two Bald Biologists. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I have actually been fishing right much lately.
Oh, good for you.
I have not really been catching. In fact, you guys, this is kind of a weird story because it never happens. Not too long ago, Corey and I were fishing on the exact same day. And he went upstream and I went downstream. And I did not fare very well, and Corey had a epic day, or at least a pretty solid day.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd call it an epic day, but I had a solid day. Now, we were fishing for two different things, so let's be fair. I was fishing for sunfish.
Success is success.
You were
and
fishing.
I did not
You were
succeed.
fishing for the old drummy poos.
Yeah,
and it worked out for us. We quit counting at 120.
yeah. I never had to count. That's how good my day was. So.
Well,
It's been tough.
yeah, it's been tough, but it's good to be back on the podcast. We've been out for a little while. We got Troy Thompson with us here today. Troy is the District 6 Fisheries Biologist 1. Troy, introduce yourself beyond that. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, that's the gist of it, but a little bit about myself is I've been here with the commission now on to 20 years now. Started at McKinney Lake Fish Hatchery.
Yeah, back
Way
when
back.
I had hair and you didn't have gray hair in your beard. But anyway, that was one.
I didn't even have a beard. I don't know why I would choose to have a beard now when it's all gray, but something to be sorted out another time.
Exactly.
But I started out of Virginia Tech, got my undergrad, worked there, worked with Dr. Ney, piddled around, worked for the Virginia DGIF for 4 or 5 years, and then went to Florida to get my master's at UF, working with bass, telemetry project on small, they call them borrow pits, but it's basically just a quarry. But they were limestone, so it was super productive, so it was a good deal.
Cool.
There are
And I
people
came
that
back
pay
up
big
here.
money to fish those ponds down there. Not those particular ones, but some of those borry pits down there. So
Yeah, their goal was to make the new state record bass down there. He was pushing it. It was a senator, and he had disposable income, so
That always helps.
and it worked.
Yeah.
He raised some big fish.
That's cool. Well, Troy, we're glad to have you today. We're going to talk a lot about a project that you've worked on and a fishery that you know quite a bit, and that's sunfish in the sandhills. And we'll talk a lot about that. But Ben kicked us off with a fishing report. Ben, you got any other? Troy, you got a fishing report? You been fishing?
All of my fishing's been with an electroshocking boat, so I've had pretty good success.
You had a busy spring.
Yeah.
Yeah, had a busy spring.
Yeah, we're just now wrapping it up. So
Yeah.
we've been quite busy.
Mostly what?
Largemouth. Yeah.
Yeah, mostly largemouth.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
I have probably caught, because we've got a catch and release study going on the Roanoke, I've probably caught more stripers this spring than previous springs because
I went with you one day and we just had a banner day.
Day.
It was successful as all get out.
that day I caught one striper and Corey caught 0 stripers.
0.
Is that why it was a banner day?
It was just
It was a tough day. It
trumped
was a tough
Corey.
day. It was really a day where only just really good skill could persevere, and that's what I had to catch my one fish, and Corey didn't.
He was lacking.
It was dumb luck. I hit him in the head, and that was the one fish we saw. In
That's
full
fishing.
disclosure.
yeah.
So, but
Well,
normally that place can be phenomenal, and we had other days that were phenomenal up there. You know, good jig bites, good bait bites, but after they spawned, the bite kind of really dwindled this year for some reason. It's got everybody scratching their heads a little bit. So.
yeah. Well, I didn't catch anything. I sat on the boat and watched you fish and catch one.
Yeah.
I mean, I did fish some, but it didn't work out well for me.
So,
But I did decide to leave and go north to go fishing. I went after smallmouth bass.
I see.
Did
Lake
you
St.
leave the
Clair.
state?
I did. I went to Michigan.
Oh,
went to
wow.
Lake St. Clair, which is
You weren't
for those-
kidding about going north.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know where Lake St. Clair is, it's between Lake Huron and Lake Erie, just outside of Detroit. And
Really dials it in.
the weather was horrible. Thanks, Troy. The weather was horrible. The wind blew. It rained. It was cold. We had one good day out of 6 days of fishing. It was sunny and warm. It was about 70 degrees, and we didn't mollywalk them, as you would say, but we did catch quite a few. But on one of those cloudy days, I brought a picture to show for those of you at home. Everybody see this if you're watching. I brought a picture just to.
He's not.
I'm very proud of this fish.
He's not tooting his own horn.
I'm not tooting my own horn, but I am.
Toot.
It's a 6-pound, 6-ounce smallmouth. I was ecstatic.
Wow.
It was an absolute pig.
It looks like he's got a hump.
But
I've never seen that. Maybe it's just the way the light.
It might be the way the person
That's
that took the
crazy.
picture. He wasn't the greatest photographer in the world, but
Big fish.
Big fish. I
That's
was
a big fish.
pretty pumped. Long story short, or short story long, caught that fish. It was my first bite of the day. It was the first fish I caught. I think I caught it at 1 in the afternoon. It was just after lunch. And when the fish came up, I about freaked, but I didn't say nothing to my partner that was fishing. And when it came up and he netted it and he actually saw it, he freaked. And then we waited and we freaked some more. Mm-hmm. And then as we were freaking out, my rod goes over the side of the boat. And I was a little disturbed by that because the past like 3 fishing trips, I think I've either broke or lost a rod. So this was another, I was like, I've lost another rod. But my buddy was like, hey, no big deal. We'll get that back. Marked it on the graph. He's like, we'll get that back. I was like, whatever. And so I'm going to tell you this tip at home for everybody. This is good information. He took a metal stringer. So if you know what a stringer is, an old metal stringer.
The old school.
The old school metal stringers with the clips on it. He took all the clips and opened them up. He tied about 8 ounces of weight on one end and a rope on the other. And he put it over the side of the boat. And he went round and round with his trolling motor for about 10, 15 minutes. And lo and behold, he said, there's a fish biting my stringer. I was like, come on, Kim. That ain't a fish biting the stringer. Mm-hmm. He's like, no, it's a fish biting the stringer. And he reels the stringer in, and it's about a foot long smallmouth on it. He's like, it's got some line coming out of his mouth. It's like it's got a Ned rig in its mouth. And he's like, it sure does. I was like, that's my rod. Right. And so we caught my rod back. I caught my second fish of the day, a foot long smallmouth.
It's funny how sometimes the toughest days can give you a really good fish.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But yeah, the stringer trick evidently works because he's retrieved a rod in 80 foot of water at Lake Norman doing that. So,
wow.
Just note to self, that is a pretty good way of doing it.
I've done it with a treble hook, just same deal, but not 80 feet of water. Just keep tossing it and pulling it back. And
yeah.
One time it was about a, 16, 18 inch sucker and got my rod back. So.
Yeah, I think those were the only 2 fish I caught that day. I'm pretty sure it might have been, but we had a great trip. I say the weather was bad, and it was bad, but we did have a good trip, and we've been to St. Clair before, and that one sunny day that we had where we caught like 35 really nice, like 3 to 4 pound smallmouth. It was worth going up there, and we'll likely go back probably next year.
Okay, so I can see that this is going to be one of those podcasts where I don't get to brag about my achievements, which is fine because I've had those, and this is now Corey's time to shine. And
let him have the limelight.
And I'm going to let him have his moment, but
my moment's over.
I'm also going to tell you guys something that he's not, and that Corey has received a promotion.
Oh gosh.
He's newly the chief of fisheries. He was the assistant chief, so I'm going to have to come up with a new nickname for him.
Yep.
But, so.
I mean, chief sounds pretty.
Right.
Is that too on the nose, as they say?
Right.
The kids say these days.
But the important thing that I want you guys to know about that is, your chief is a fisherman, and he likes to fish. He understands fishing. He tries to fish sometimes, at least according to this current podcast, very successfully. Other podcasts, maybe not so much. But I think it's a great avenue for the Wildlife Commission to go down. We've had a lot of good chiefs in the past, and I think Corey's going to continue that lineage. So,
well, I appreciate that, Ben.
You remember a few podcasts ago, we had Christian on. Christian is now in the director's office. He's our deputy director. So the shuffle has now yielded
a new chief.
a new chief, and it just happens to be a Baldwin. So
Well, you're stuck with me until you're not. You're stuck with me until you're not.
I have no clue what that means.
Yep.
Troy.
Yep.
But
Anyway,
until you're not sounds a little daunting. So
Yeah, I don't know about the.
well, there'll be a
I
time.
don't know
there'll
about
be
the
a time-
balding.
There'll be a time when I'm done. That's when
Yeah.
when you're not. That's
I
when
thought
you
he
won't
was
be
saying there'll be a time when I'm done.
Well, there will be that too, but I'm not. I'm not saying
He's
that.
not making those plans.
Wow,
just
we've
yet.
gotten wayward. We're only 10 minutes in. We're wayward. Sorry.
All right. So listen, we're going to talk about sandhills brim fishing today. So first, let's talk about a brim because we have a myriad of different listeners, and brim is kind of it's a southern term, but not everybody uses it. So brim are sunfish, most typically bluegills and red ears.
But there's a whole lot of them.
There's a bunch in that list. Warmouse and
Red breast,
redbreast and
pumpkin seeds,
pumpkin. Oh,
green sunfish.
It's almost easier just to discard the ones that are not brim from the sunfish family. So
It is.
like, well,
it is.
largemouth bass, all the bass are in the sunfish family,
But they're not brim. Yeah.
they're not brim.
Yeah.
Crappies, I would say, not brim.
Crappies aren't brim.
Yeah.
I'll throw a
Flyers,
twist.
probably not brim, but could be brim.
I think I would call them a brim myself. But
They're that round hand sized fish. That's what I think a brim
yeah,
is.
like a
One that-
panfish. To
yeah.
throw another term out that gets
Yeah,
used for
panfish.
everything.
That's right. But crappie do get thrown into the panfish category.
True, that's true.
So
There's
a lot
no
of,
right or wrong answers, I think.
Yeah.
if you're from like the Wisconsin area, I had a friend call them sunnies, sunfish, but they're all in that group of collective panfish.
What I
So-
really like is looking on some of these fishing social media pages where they put a fish up and they're like, identify it, and people will like,
that's not a bluegill, it's a brim.
they'll be like, that's a pumpkin seed, and I'm like, no, it's a red ear. No, it's a pumpkin seed. No, it's a red.
Yeah.
And then they get angry at one another, like, no, it's a pumpkin seed. I know it's a pumpkin. I'm like, no, it's still a red ear.
And sometimes the ones that are arguing with each other, they're both wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, which is why you shouldn't get mad at social media.
That's
as
exactly
a general
right.
rule.
That's right. But I find it funny, looking at people trying to identify fish, and I get it. Sometimes it's not easy from a picture to tell.
And to be honest, you guys have sent us a lot of fish pictures and said, I caught this, what is it? And we've been happy to identify those and get y'all the right information.
We got to have a
hopefully.
good picture, though. I will say that.
Better.
If it's a picture of the belly of the fish, and that's all we see. Is
Yeah.
just
Don't pretend like your fish is in the witness protection program. Like
If it's 20 feet away,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to make out the details.
that's right. Show it off.
I caught this green fish and one of his legs were shorter than the other. What was it? You know, that's tough to give a good
a tough one.
identification. So
Anyway.
but we're going to talk about eventually. We're going to give Troy a chance to talk about brim fishing and in his region, which is a very unique part of the state in the Sandhills. So talk to us, just talk to us a little bit about the Sandhills, and then we'll get into brim fishing after that.
All right. So, yeah, a lot of people don't really know about the Sandhills. Excuse me. So where they're at, they're basically on the junction between the Piedmont and the coastal plain. And in our state, it's the southern part, but it's probably around Sanford area south. But they go all the way into South Carolina, down around Orangeburg. But they're remnants of old sand dunes, basically, when the ocean used to be a lot higher. So I own some land in Anson County, and I tell people, this was waterfront property 100 million years ago. So, day late and dollar short, right? But
So it's that kind of southern central part of the state, correct?
yeah,
Yeah. And
like west of Fayetteville, Rockinham's sort of the southeastern part of it, but
the rolling piney woods, so to speak. So
A lot of pine trees and a lot of sand, and it's hot in the summertime.
it's just far enough that you don't get any of that coastal coastal wind, So
Yeah, it's like being at the beach with no wind.
Yeah. If you pay
or
attention,
ocean.
Yeah.
if you look at the weather, a lot of times that patch is like 5 or 6 degrees hotter than everywhere else.
Oh yeah, I think it's because, well, I don't know, but it's on sand, so it's reflecting
Right.
it's reflecting the light back at you, and it's not soaking it in like other ground does.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just hot there.
Yep.
But it's a pretty unique habitat. There's not a lot. It's longleaf pines were native there, and there's if this was a wildlife podcast, we'd be talking about red cock-headed woodpeckers and gopher tortoises and all the other unique species that are in that world.
What's the water quality like there?
Poor. Well, it's great for drinking.
Well, I wouldn't consider it poor then.
Because it goes through a sand filter.
Right. It's a sand filter. It's filtered water. So
Real clean water, real clear water.
it's great for
Tannic.
drinking. When I say poor, it's poor for production.
Poor nutrient load.
Yeah, nutrients are not really there. They get washed out
Yeah.
and flushed downstream. So a lot of the sand's sitting right on clay or bedrock. Substrate is really firm, so any nutrients that get down, when they reach that, they get shunted into these. They call them drains, but so there's lots of flow through the area. But
But that
tough
makes
life for a farmer. They're trying to grow crops on sand, and it'll hold their roots. But
does it
if
make
you
make it tough to grow fish too?
yeah,
The same nutrients that grow crops grow
yeah.
fish.
If you know anything about pond management, it's basically the same as farming. It's just underwater. So if that makes sense.
It does.
I'm joking. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But
So we've got some game lands in the Sandhills, correct? And there's some ponds on them.
oh yeah,
So if there's a pond on a game land, guess what that means to you guys? That means that there's fishing opportunities to be had. So
and oftentimes unique fisheries. They're very diverse and neat places to go fish, I think. I'm talking about productivity, and it makes it sound like they're bad. I don't mean that at all. It's just that you can't produce the same standing crop poundage per acre.
Yeah.
Not to say you won't have the best experience of your life if you go down and catch a 12-pound bass. It's possible.
Yeah.
But as far as just total poundage, it won't compete with the Piedmont in general.
Yeah,
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is basically don't have an expectation that you're going to a Jordan Lake.
Right.
You're going to a sandhill lake or pond,
it's
right?
a different
And so
experience.
the water, my experience there, the water has been pretty tannic. So it's kind of
tannic.
that real brown but clear. It's like tea. It looks like tea water.
Yep.
But there's also talk a little bit, Troy, about like the species that you typically find in those waters, because it is a little different than, say, a Jordan Lake, for example.
So a couple of unique species. They're not totally unique, but they do very well in the sandhills or pickerels, chain pickerels, redfin pickerels, yellow perch.
Yeah.
Which, not to bring the perch thing back up or the brim thing, but we used to call brim perch growing up.
Yeah,
and
I
then,
did too.
you got yellow perch or true perch and white perch or more of a temperate bass, and then it all gets mixed up. But anyway, yellow perch do great in the sandhills. And there's lots of small brim, let's say brim species that live and do well down there. They don't really get that big, a lot of them, like spotted sunfish, flyers, and you even got the little tiny stuff that, maybe the microfishing people could catch, blue spotted sunfish, banded sunfish.
blue spotted sunfish is probably one of the more pretty fish found in North Carolina.
A beautiful fish.
Yeah. I agree.
As we said early on in our podcast, it would be the wildflower of the brim community.
That was a long time ago, Ben. You pulling back, are you?
Pulling back.
Pulling back.
The wildflower, you said?
Yeah, we had a guest that said brook trout were the wildflower of the mountains.
Oh.
Yeah. I
I can
believe
see
that's
why
what he
that
said.
would become a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's saying the blue spotted sunfish would be the wildflower of the sunfish family.
Yeah.
So I like it.
And there's some pygmy sunfish. There's a lot of
Mhm.
neat sunfish down there.
Yeah.
Bluegills are there, and red ears, but they don't
So-
do that great.
If I was gonna go to one of these sandhill ponds and I was gonna let's just say I had a beetle spin, some crickets, and some worms, what would I expect to catch? Like, what would be a daily, list of species that I would catch with that kind of thing?
I would say the bluegill, red ear, warmouth. We didn't name him
Warmouth.
warmouth. He's a cool guy.
Yeah.
Some of them have green sunfish, which is not native, but it's there. The yellow perch you'll catch, probably yellow bullhead, or brown bullhead. I think that's the one, but there's both, I think. But nothing really big. You might catch a decent sized largemouth if your cricket's alive and moving around. But and then there's the pickerels. You might not have much luck.
Probably
If you
not
had
with
some bait,
crickets.
if you had some bait like a
you had
minnow
minnow.
or something, you'd have better odds of catching one of those.
So, and which game lands are we talking about?
The sandhills,
The Sandhill
Gamelands.
game lands.
Yeah,
So you can look them up on our webpage. They're on multiple maps, as a matter of fact, because they're on the Game Lands map and they're on the Where to Fish map, correct?
Correct.
yeah, and there's several of them. Baggett's Lake, Crappy Lake, one called Scotland, Crawford, Kenny Cameron. There's several of them. They range in size from a couple acres to, I guess McKinney Lake's the biggest now at 65 acres since gum swamps went down.
So we're not talking big places.
Now they're little places that are kind of hard to get to, some of them, so you need a truck. But most of them have a decent, I say decent, maybe not concrete, but a way to get a little boat in the water. Mostly you picture people with 12-foot john boats or something like that, canoes,
Yeah.
or fishing from the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The cool thing I like about a smaller lake is that you can just show up one day with a couple of fishing rods and walk around the edge and fish it fairly effectively. You don't have to worry about, I got to make a 12-mile run to get to the upper end of the reservoir or something like that. Like you can walk around the circumference of some of these in just an hour or so, and fish it fairly effectively. So I think that's one of the neat things about them is you don't have to have the fanciest of gear to get it done. In fact,
that's right.
pair of knee boots and an ultralight, and you can have a heck of a day. So
Yeah.
Do people still use those belly boats? Remember them little, I'm not sure if I'm even saying it right, but it was like a float.
Inflatables.
Yeah, and you just like
inflatable
paddle
tubes.
along.
Yeah, I still
would-
see people using that.
yeah.
Yeah. That would
Something
work there.
like that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I've seen, the Sandhills Lakes, I definitely kayaks, canoes, small, like you said, small john boats. You wouldn't want to put anything big in them because they're just not big enough really to hold a large vessel, and two, the access area probably doesn't even provide a really good spot to even do that. McKinney Lake is probably the best access area.
It's the best.
Yeah, it's
by
the
far,
It's
I
the
would
best,
say.
and it's right next to our hatchery. So I mean, there's a road that goes, a fairly good road that goes down in there to it, and we'll talk more about McKinney Lake in a minute. But all these are 100 acres or less at the most.
65
Yeah.
is the biggest now.
Okay, 65 is the biggest.
Yeah.
And so there's something. They're like large ponds, basically, is what they are.
Yep.
But they do have flow in them, don't they? I mean,
They have a ton of flow.
yeah. So they
which
have a lot.
can be problematic for
Yeah.
making things better
Yeah.
because it just flushes downstream. But they
Yeah.
have lots of flow, so you rarely go to one and it's really low.
Yeah.
Unless we're controlling it, because these are all fully controllable. And
Yeah. Yeah.
One lake in particular, I think it's called Scotland Lake. They keep it down for the gopher frogs.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
So I mean, you can look them up, like as Ben mentioned. You can look them up on our Game Lands maps. You can look them on Where to Fish. They'll be on those as well. And there's, how many would you say there are? How many? I mean, there's quite a few that aren't really
Depends on how
access areas, but
yeah, it Depends on how you count. I would say 10 or so.
Yeah.
Because
Scattered.
Broadacres is an example where there's maybe 3 different little impoundments.
Yeah.
And they're just
And they're scattered across maybe 4 or 5 counties, something like that.
mostly Richmond and Scotland,
Okay.
and mostly along the border of those two. That's where the predominant
That's where the
big
most of them
portion
are.
of the game lands is.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep.
So if you like, I mean, Corey said a minute ago, tannic, brown, sweet tea colored water. So if you like casting at Bojangles Tea,
Yeah.
this is the place
this
for
is the
you.
place
It's
for you.
also relatively clear, and one of the cool things is, especially in the spring, you can see bass beds relatively well, even though it is tannic
Yeah.
in certain ponds, and so it, also based on the rainfall, if it's muddied
Right.
up, you
I was
can't.
getting ready to say,
But
depends on the rain.
and then starting, we're in the
June-ish, late
yeah.
May, June-ish.
starting late May, early June, you can start to see brim beds really well.
Yep.
And like Troy said, maybe not the place to find a 2-pound brim, but if you find brim beds that you don't like to fish, call me and I'll fish them for you. Not a problem. So, because fishing brim beds is one of the, I think a lot of times
It's one of my favorite things to do.
as we get, develop in our fishing and whether it's bass, whether it's stripers, whether it's mountain trout, whatever, we forget that brim beds are always here for us.
Yes. They
They-
keep
they're-
giving and giving
They're
and giving.
forever faithful. They,
Yep.
they're
Yep.
always, if you know where they are, they're going to be there
Yep.
year in, year out.
Yeah, they rarely change.
and I
Takes a
think
massive cataclysmic event to change them.
And some of them are stacked up like honeycombs. If it's in an ideal place,
Yep.
they're just building on top of each other.
And-
beside of each other, I
Yep.
guess I should
Yep.
say.
No, that's
But
exactly what they're doing.
Just stacked up.
they're a great place for me to fish. They're a great place for kids to fish. They're a great
Yeah.
place to fish if you're not super experienced. They're
Yeah.
a great place to fish if you are experienced and you want to go catch fish.
Yeah,
you know.
depending on where you are in the state, anywhere from mid-May till basically, heck, probably sometime late August. Particularly with bluegill, these beds are pretty active and will give you excellent opportunity to catch fish. Sometimes you catch big ones, sometimes you don't. It just depends. Depends on the fishery. But yeah, I mean, it's my bread and butter. I'll just be honest with you.
So if you were, since it's your bread and butter,
I'm a simple guy.
let's talk about, we've talked about geology. We've talked about the lakes. We've talked about the water quality. If you were going to fish, if you walked up on one of these sandhill ponds and you saw a bunch of, anywhere from a saucer to a serving dish circles on the bottom, and you saw brim swimming around inside those circles, what would you throw?
Well, I'm a live bait guy, so I'll say that up front. I'm
Right on, man.
I'm a crickets
I'm
and
with
worms
you.
guy. That's how I grew up.
Yep.
That's just who I am. I mean, if I'm not live baiting, it's going to be a white beetle spin. White beetle spin works almost every time. And when they're on bed, they're aggravated with it. A beetle spin, they'll be aggravated with it. Same with cricket. Like crickets, they'll get aggravated with that too. That I don't know that they're necessarily trying to eat that cricket. They're just trying to get it out of the bed. And so, generally I am live bait fishing. When I'm sun fishing, I'll go get a tube of crickets, put it on a hook with a cork, and go fishing. And that's what I love to do. That's what I grew up doing. It's the simplest way to fish, in my opinion.
Sometimes it's good to get back to the.
Oh yeah, that's when I caught that 120. He didn't catch anything. That's what I was doing. So
There's something magical about the tiny cork. Just
Tell me more
and
about
it goes under.
how you're better than me. Let's just get it out. This is the Corey show today.
it is. It
let
is.
him have his moment.
He's the chief now. You have to give him a little leeway.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
A lot of patience in Ben. A lot of patience. Ben has a lot of patience from me. But no, but I mean, seriously though, I mean, it is, you're going to, at least for me, live bait fishing, you're going to probably catch 4 to 1. Most of the time live baiting with sunfish, at least in my opinion. I've I've done that several times, like live baited and artificial fished at the same time, and see my success rate. And generally, live bait just does better.
As a general rule.
And as a general rule, with almost every fish, because that artificial bait, you're mimicking something that they want, but then live baiting, you're putting exactly what they want. It's the real thing in front of them. So yeah.
So I'm going to get about as technical as I'll ever get with brim fishing, because the beauty of brim fishing is that it's not technical.
That's right.
But there's basically, in my experience in fishing, bedding fish in general, is there's the feeding, which is always a good option. Then there's when they're making the nest, which that's when you throw a little jig in the center of the nest, and they'll pick it up to move it, because they want that nest to be clean. And they'll pick it up to move it. And as soon as they pick it up, especially if it's really clear water, and you use, like a pink curly tail or something like that, and just throw it in the center of the bed, you'll watch them pick it up, and then you can hook them that way.
Yep.
And then once they have eggs, and right before those eggs hatch, they get really defensive. And that's when that white beetle spin can be real good, and they'll chase it off because they don't want anything that looks like a predator in their bed. And so they're trying to push them off. And believe it or not, bluegill in particular, most sunfish when they're on bed are really aggressive. But bluegill in particular, if you put a bluegill in an aquarium with a bass, it takes a long time for those two to get used to each other. And in fact, sometimes the bluegill beats up on the bass more so than the other way around. Assuming the size ratio.
That's right.
A little bass and a big brim.
I definitely agree with that. I think bluegills, smallmouth bass is another one that will not tolerate anything near their nest whatsoever. Whereas a largemouth or some other sunfish species they'll eye it. Like, you can watch the fish behavior when the water's clear. They're okay, I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to look at it. I'm not really going to do anything.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make sure you're not something that's going to cause a problem. And if you aggravate them enough, you might get a largemouth to bite it, whereas bluegill and smallmouth, if you come, I don't know what that cone of influence is on their bed, but and each fish has a little bit different cone of influence, but you get inside that cone of influence with that fish, they are not going to tolerate it during spawning season. They are going to move that bait out, and you can sit. I've watched smallmouth just literally, they'll pick the bait up and you'll try to catch it. You won't set the hook. You can throw it right back. You could sit there and aggravate a smallmouth all day long, and they will sit there and move that bait all day long.
It's a great feature for anglers.
So it seems like you've talked a little bit about smallmouth bass in a brim fishing podcast. Is there any particular reason why?
Well, there's sunfish too.
Have you caught any significant smallmouth bass recently?
But they're not brim.
Shall I show it again?
They're not brim.
For those of you at home, shall I show it again?
See what I did for him there? Yeah. I gave him a chance to tee him up.
Is that even Corey in the picture, though?
It might not be.
That might be somebody else.
I think I got it off the internet.
Yeah.
He got the mount off of eBay and dunked it in the water.
That's right. Made it shine.
To make it glossy.
So one of the things that I also like about it is we talked about how you can go to anywhere, you can buy a combo, 6, 10 pound test, 4 pound test, whatever you want. You can get as fancy as you want to.
Yeah.
You can buy a highfalutin ultralight or a fly rod, and you can do very well with that, but you don't need that. Like, any combo.
I've caught them all kinds of ways.
Yeah, can be good. So
don't forget the bamboo pole.
Yeah, you can go
very simple
from a cane pole to a $500 fly rod or more. You can do really any setup will work. You can go crickets under a bobber. One of the tricks that Troy and I were talking about was small bobbers, weighting your bobbers a lot so they're barely floating, so that when they grab the bait, they don't feel a whole lot of resistance.
Right, it pulls it right under.
Mm-hmm.
And one mistake I see a lot of young or starting anglers, they'll use a hook that's way too big just because their grandpa had it or whoever they got it from. Like, you need to use a smaller hook, size 8 or
Yeah, we were talking about fish other than the warmouth. We're talking about fish that have a really small mouth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't want the giant bobber that they can't pull under, because it's probably frustrating for the fish as well as the angler when he's like, come on.
Yeah.
So
much tension.
you make it easy for them. Make it easy for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so once you move from, worms, crickets, grasshoppers, whatever you catch, pro tip, and this is also a careful. If you can find a wasp nest and use the wasp larvae, they'll eat the fool out of it. Do not get stung though.
It sounds like you need younger brothers for that aspect.
Yeah, my
like Troy's thinking.
You need somebody to clean them out. Right?
You need the one to run out in front, right?
Yeah. I'm not saying go poke a wasp nest, but if your dad, granddad, uncle get you a wasp nest, don't let them throw it away. Use the wasp nest because they make good bait. So, and they come in a nice package once the wasps are gone.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But,
I guess you can
don't,
rinse.
Don't tote them around with the flying ones on it.
But full disclosure, you have to be real careful doing
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Rinse all the gas off.
around my granddaddy's pond, he had a bunch of old bricks, and we would lift up those bricks and get the wasp nests out of the holes in the bricks, and that's what we did. But again,
That's a good way to get stung by a yellow jacket. Is what that is.
It was an excellent way to get stung.
I was thinking of black widows even worse.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that you should do it. You should just go buy some stuff. But if you're hard up, it can be excellent.
Hey, I spent many a day with my dad as a young boy catching stuff in the grass, putting it on a hook, and catching bluegills. That's
Old green grasshopper is hard to beat.
That was before. That was before we had a boat. That was. I was a little boy at that point. My dad spent 90% of the time catching stuff in the grass, bringing it back and putting it on my hook. That's how we fished.
But for a young kid, that's half the fun.
Oh,
Catching the bait.
Oh,
You
yeah.
feel like you're self-sufficient.
Yeah, it was good.
Full disclosure, don't poke a wasp nest.
Okay,
But if you
we've
find a
covered
wasp nest,
We
That's
can have
good
like a
bait.
flashing warning at the bottom.
right.
yeah, we'll have a ticker on the bottom of the
It just
screen.
scrolls through.
So if we move away from the hook and bobber, then we're talking about beetle spins, small, like 2-inch or smaller curly tail grubs,
Rooster
straight
tail.
tails, rooster tails,
Yeah.
really small crankbaits.
Once again, small hooks.
Yeah, you
Small
can
baits.
even take, and I learned this from Kevin Dockendorf, our crappie expert
And flyer expert.
and flyer expert.
Maybe the only one in the state.
You can take a
Certified.
fairly small bobber and put just a jig underneath it, and it
Oh, yeah.
will work as well.
Oh, yeah.
Especially around these bedding fish or around stump piles and things like that. It also works for crappie, which is why our crappie expert knows about it.
Yes. Correct.
Let's see, what else can we use? But it really anything small.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
and
crappie jigs.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's a paddle tail, straight tail,
No.
a curly tail. Really, anything small, but it's hard to beat beetle spins or rooster tails or something like that, or just a small jig. And then when you up the ante one more time, to fly fishing, one of the things that I grew up on was throwing popping bugs.
Oh yeah, I did that too.
And yeah, if you throw a popping bug on top of it's like top water bait fishing for brim, which is great.
Yeah.
So
What I found when growing up in the eastern part of the state, like when it got super, super hot, fly fishing for whatever reason worked well for me. Now, generally, we didn't catch a lot of, we caught some bluegills, but what we really caught were warmouth. Like you go into like August and September, if you would just put a popping bug up next to a cypress knee or something like that, warmouth were there. And it was just like, we would catch, heck, it was probably 70-80% of our catch on the day would be warmouth.
Cool.
Now, I don't really care to catch warmouth because if you know anything about them, they hit like they're crushing it. And then as soon as they feel tension on the line, they go,
They give up.
they lay on their side and get reeled in. So it's not my favorite.
I
Well,
like,
they hit
I like
those-
big ones because they're good to eat.
Oh, yeah, they are tasty.
You know, in the late summer, the grasshoppers are always seem like they're giant. So did you ever have any luck catching warmouth with those? Because bluegills wouldn't touch them.
Yeah,
you'd have to like break their legs off and
yeah,
things like that.
I never used something that large, so I can't say that I would even know. But I never used a bait quite that big. Well, so I heard several times, Troy, you kept talking about the sand hills and talking about brim fishing in the sand hills, and that, well, you might not catch a big one. Well, you might not catch a big one. And we talked about that was because of productivity, right? I mean, for the most part, it's because of productivity.
I mean, there's big ones, but
yeah, but in
the percentage might be the same, but the numbers are a lot less.
Yeah, the numbers are less.
Yeah,
exactly. So tell us a little bit about the project that you did at McKinney Lake, where you tried to tackle some of those things.
Right. So, like I mentioned, lots of flow through, water's poor, not very many nutrients in it. And actually, a lot of work was done on the Sand Hills Lakes way back. Maybe I'll do a little brief recounting of how we ended up with all this wonderful land for people to use, but it all goes back to the Depression, and the land was really poor and nobody was making money off of it. The crops were failing, and so they had the Resettlement Act, and that's really what led to us getting all this land, national forests, national parks. Most of the land in the east that we have was bought around in the 30s by the federal government, and this land's like $2 to $5 an acre.
Yeah,
so cheap, but then people were glad to get it because they couldn't sell it. And
I'd be glad to get some $5 an acre.
I
would buy as much as I could get.
Well, that's what we did back then. But so it was very forward thinking, but a lot of it ended up being. And so then, the second part is they put the people to work, like the Civilian Conservation Corps, Works Progress Administration. They put them to work. So in the span of about 5 years, at what is now our game lands, they built 10 to 12 dams, built a fish hatchery.
Yep.
They're raising brim, bass, catfish to put into them. They got a game farm to raise turkey and quail. They got a giant nursery to grow longleaf pines and loblollies to replant the soil to get the trees back because a lot of them had been logged off. But all this up between 1936 and 41 was amazing. So then, World War II had been going on since 39 in Europe, but we didn't get into 42. But really, I think what we did with the CCC really set the stage for us becoming the arsenal of democracy. We just switched it right into military.
Yeah.
So all the game lands, now game lands, was Camp Hoffman, became Camp McCall. But so then they, World War II concluded in 1948. They give most of the land except for 6,000 or 7,000 acres of Camp McCall. They give to the state. So we got the benefit from all of those game lands and all the ponds. And so in the late 30s, they were doing a lot of the same things we're doing now.
Yeah.
For wildlife and the betterment of the land. But and McKinney Lake's one of them. So that's where this lake is that I did my project on. I went on a long tangent. So
Yes, he did.
but I will bring it right back.
It's a good
I'm bringing
tangent.
it right back. I figured it might be interesting to
good.
5 people, at least 5 people.
Well, we got 3 that listen to us, so you're good.
Well, we got a lot of game lands, so it's important to know kind of where they came from, at least some of them.
But a lot of work was done on our reservoirs, the little ponds in the 50s, 60s, particularly in the early 40s. But one of them was that they abandoned pretty soon was fertilizing and liming. Traditional farm pond. They tried it and it was just
pushing it through.
They had lots of help, way more help than we could ever wish to have, and they couldn't keep up with it.
Yeah, because the water
It
flows
just
so tremendous.
blasted right through.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of aquatic vegetation as well in the sand hills that kind of sequesters a lot of the nutrients. But so if you think about it, if you're really fertilizing it, most likely you're fertilizing the vegetation, which is not making phytoplankton, which is the base of the food chain.
Yep.
So
So
long story short, I wanted
growing fish.
I wanted to bypass all of that and just, hey, why don't I just feed the fish? They
Yeah.
can put the food right in their mouth, and we don't have to worry about flow through or acid water or any of that. So that's what we did at McKinney Lake. We put 10 feeders out, really nice feeders. They hold 300 pounds, so we could fill them once a month and feed about 1.5 pounds per acre, but 10 pounds a day per feeder. And the goal was to produce some big bluegill. That was the main goal.
Yeah.
And it was successful. It
Yeah.
really was. The hardest part was proving that it was successful, because if y'all don't know, electrofishing, you need to have conductive water, and the mineral content of the water is so low that electricity won't even flow through it. So it's hard for us to get the fish that we needed to see
To show that,
it was actually
Yeah.
working. We basically went on what anglers are catching and the few that we could catch. But we caught several in the 1.5 to 2 pound range, and they totally weren't there before. So,
Yeah.
Sure.
but one thing I did learn initially was it's not like a Piedmont pond. The bluegill reproduction recruitment just really wasn't there. So, and I found that out early on. So we started stocking it every year with excess fish from the hatchery.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know, they raise catfish in probably 20 ponds just below the lake. The lake's the source of the water, but bluegill always end up in these ponds.
Yeah. Just part of it.
So it's like a byproduct.
We had some
So it's
extra
really a
bluegill.
win-win to take those bluegill that they would have just
Yeah.
sent downstream and put them in the McKinney Lake. And an extra benefit of that is they're already feed trained, so they're used to eating the feed.
Yeah.
So
So the project fed bluegill, or fed whatever really, but bluegill was what you were focused on for the most part.
I knew
Yeah.
other stuff would eat it, and I thought maybe the bass could get a secondary benefit just from having more forage potentially.
So from the project, you learned basically that recruitment's not great in the Sandhills, or at least not at McKinney Lake. It might be great somewhere else, but it's not great
But
at
probably
McKinney.
not,
And recruitment, once again, everybody, recruitment is basically babies being born and surviving out to adulthood.
Yep.
And so that wasn't going great. So you supplemented that with stocking, and you also supplemented their nutrient load with feeding.
Right.
And you turned out some
Really nice
borderline 2 pound. I saw
Yeah.
pictures of them. They were
Yeah.
very quality size fish.
Had I known you were bringing pictures, I would have printed some off.
That's right. We should have.
But I could send
Anyway.
you some if
Yeah,
if
we'll-
y'all have
we'll-
the technology.
Yeah,
to
we'll put some when
splice them in, but-
when we do the post for sure.
Yeah.
On the podcast. But
So-
yeah,
But one thing about it is these people, or the anglers there, they tend to eat what they catch.
yeah,
And from what I hear, they're very tasty. But
good.
Bluegill in general,
I like
Yeah.
bluegill.
very tasty.
Yeah.
So the thing that I like about it is this is kind of a unique thing that we've done there. It's not necessarily something you can do everywhere.
No.
Because it's 10 feeders that have to be filled monthly, and that's a lot. That's a chore. That's a big
it's a lot
chore.
of work.
So
Kudos to the McKinney Lake hatchery staff that helped me out on that and
So-
do most of the work.
So it's not necessarily something that you could do in every situation. It was at a site that we had the manpower and had the resources to do it. But it worked. And we've, I mean, anybody that has a feeder on their pond knows that the feeder is basically like a corn pile for fishing, so it attracts the fish. It supplements their diet, supplements their growth. They can make them, especially in a nutrient poor place, it can allow them to grow more babies and do better on recruitment if the habitat allows for that. But this is a unique thing with relatively large brim. So
Yeah. Well, I think the take home is, one, it was an opportunity where Troy saw that he could potentially, make a fishery better. exactly what you said. It's not going to work everywhere. It's only going to work in places that are small. You're not going to be able to do this at a large enough scale on a bigger place. You know, it's probably, I mean, McKinney Lake is a pretty big place to actually attempt it, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, we tried to basically take a farm pond exercise and expand it, but we just, as Troy said, we bypassed all the nutrient part because we knew that wasn't going to work because that had already been tried.
Right.
You know, so it was just strictly, we're going to feed these rascals and see if it actually works. And it did. And so, you know, and it gave opportunity, and it's giving opportunity for anglers to go catch in that area of the state, go catch a very quality size bluegill if they want to go do that. You know, it gives them that opportunity, which I think is a great thing, because most of the places that they go in the Sandhills, they're probably not going to see those kinds of quality just because of the water quality that we've already talked about. So
that's correct.
That's what I loved about the project, is that it gave an opportunity for anglers that they didn't have. And yes, it required quite a bit of effort, but it's still fairly low tech. You know, it's not a real high tech type thing to do. You know, we're feeding fish, you know, kind of thing. So.
And one good thing about the Sandhills in this case is sometimes you get into trouble on a really productive pond by overfeeding.
Yeah.
And you might have oxygen depletion and fish kills. I get calls in the late summer for just that problem. Not a real big concern with the Sandhills because of the flow through.
Yeah, it's constantly moving.
So
to be and Troy talked about it, but if you have a pond and there's a lot of flow through, fertilizing and liming doesn't really work. And so the only way
might help the guy downstream.
Right.
He'll thank you.
Or two guys
maybe
downstream. Yeah. But because we were able to feed in this instance, that was really the only way to give these fish a boost. And I think that's why it worked in this instance. Also, if you guys hadn't been to McKinney Lake, it's a scenic place. It's, you know, you got rolling hills. You know, if you go there in spring, you know, you probably hear turkey gobbles while you're looking for brim or bass. The shoreline is we talked about how the shoreline is weedy, but there's also lily pads in a lot of these ponds and things like that can offer good habitat as well.
Decent bass fishing.
Yeah.
And lots of targets to throw out. But yeah, I stressed that some of these lakes are really beautiful. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like going back to 1940. Some of them, you probably need a decent truck to get to some of them. I mean, I'm not kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
But once you get there, you're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique part of the state. I mean, it's really a unique part of the country. Mm-hmm. There's really only I think two places like this. One's the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, and then the Sandhills of North Carolina and South Carolina, and they're very similar habitats. But it's you're not going to see a lot of people. You're going to see a lot of wildlife.
That's right.
And if you
want to get away from it all, that's a good place to go.
If you want to get away from it all, it's a great place to go fishing and hang out. If you go in August, be prepared to sweat. That's all I got to say about that.
Little bug spray wouldn't hurt.
Little bug spray wouldn't hurt either.
If you're not afraid of tannic water, you could swim.
Yeah, that's right.
It gets pretty cool.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, is there anything else about brim fishing in the Sandhills we need to talk about before we go to questions?
I just think it's a great opportunity for folks to get out, whether they go to McKinney Lake or one of the other ones.
Yeah.
It's, you know, anytime you're learning a new area, there's a little bit of daunting.
Yeah.
The learning curve in these lakes is not real hard. So don't let it scare you. Don't let it, intimidate you. You can go, you can figure it out. And then you can apply what you learn to wherever you're at more regularly.
Yeah, and if you got questions about the Sandhills Game Lands or fishing on the Sandhills Game Lands, you can contact us at twobaldbiologists@ncwildlife.gov. We'll be glad to hook you up with Troy or someone else that we think might be a little bit better, but Troy's kind of the guru of it. He can tell us all about the different lakes.
Yeah, glad and
he can tell you he can tell you how to get there and all that kind of stuff. So just contact us at twobaldbiologists@ncwildlife.gov and we will get that information to you.
And if they're out of the white beetle spin, use the yellow one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know what I did?
Don't be afraid.
I did have a thought based on my old trout fishing. Back on the bait, you reminded me of it. So if you're want to catch hatchery trout, power bait. So I kind of wondered if power bait might not work pretty good at McKinney Lake. Something
Probably
like
so,
that.
'cause
I'm imagining it would.
Yeah, I would
Especially
imagine
around
it
those
would.
feeders.
Yeah, around those feeders in
Yeah.
particular, it would. I would agree with that.
All right. So you guys have sent us questions fairly regularly. It seems like, especially after every podcast, there's a bit of a bump in the questions that we get. Lots of pond management questions, lots of fish ID questions. This spring, there was lots of fish questions about shad and stripers.
Yep.
But now we got some other questions about, let's see. I picked some of these because we had Troy here, and he knows a lot. Since we're talking about ponds, some of these are relatively pond specific tips. We had a guy who was going fishing to a pond, and he wanted to know what he should throw to be successful for largemouth and bass at his pond. Basically, looking for pond fishing tips. And I think basically what we've already talked about is good. Crickets, worms, beetle spins, rooster tails, curly tail grubs. If you're looking for bass, one of my favorite pond baits is a Cinco style bait.
Yep.
Just with either wacky style, which I don't really throw that much, or just rig it weedless.
Yep.
On a wide gap hook.
Yeah, the little mud hole down by my house that works very consistently.
You know, Texas rigs work. Really, buzz baits, spinner baits can be real
Especially
good.
if it's bass crowded. There's a bunch of little fish.
But really, that's kind of one of the beauty things about a pond is it has relatively low exploitation, which means relatively low numbers of people fishing it.
Yep.
So you can generally post pretty good numbers. One of the downsides of bass crowded is that you don't see a lot of big fat fish.
Yep.
But one of the good sides is you got a lot of hungry fish.
Yep.
So you can
The action's
you can
usually
do
pretty good.
A lot of catching. So I hope that helps. In staying in pond fishing themes, we got and this is going to be our winner,
Excellent.
Mr. Grayson. He's recently had a baby. Congratulations. Sometimes when mama needs a break,
His fishing just went down, but whatever.
his fishing
Slightly.
it may go down a little
Might go
bit.
down a little bit. Yeah.
I had, when my kid was 3 years old, I had a lot of stories that started with, I haven't done this in 3 years, and I finally did the math. But now she's 5 and we go do it together. So
That's
it's
right.
great. Straps his baby to his chest and goes fishing when mama needs a break.
Right
so
on.
you're our winner.
He is.
Random winner.
Random.
But you
But
win.
we picked it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for that alone.
Just for that, you became our random winner. And he used to have a kayak, and kudos to you for realizing you probably shouldn't kayak with your baby strapped to you because
No.
that could
Turn out bad.
result in problems.
Make you a little more top heavy than you would like.
But he's been fishing from the shore, and he's just kind of looking for some tips. Are there baits that work better from shore, or maybe baits that anglers shouldn't, or fish that he should target when he's going while he's out there fishing from shore? So I don't know exactly where he's fishing. I know he's around Winston-Salem, so I'm assuming he's fishing ponds or the river. But the main thing to fish, and it doesn't matter where you're at, you need to be able to effectively present that bait, you know. And so it doesn't matter if you're on a boat, kayak, fishing from the bank, fishing from the dock, whatever, you have to be able to effectively present the bait. So if you're fishing shallow water or standing on the bank fishing shallow water, it's probably not the time to pull out, a DD22 crankbait that dives 22 foot deep.
You can, but it's going to be on the beach a lot.
You might donate it.
You might.
real quick.
You
Yeah.
might donate it. That's for certain.
I think you won't get many casts in.
Right. So to me, when I'm pond fishing, again, the same list of things that we already did, but one of my favorite from the bank is a buzz bait, because you can throw a buzz bait right down the shoreline and bring it in, and that can be really effective for bass. Spinner bait is much the same way. When in doubt, Texas rig.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, when
with
in doubt.
any type of bait on it.
Yeah.
But you just want to avoid something that's going to dive real deep and really not be effective for you.
And you also got to think about how you're presenting that bait around structure. I always find it hilarious that people in boats are throwing to shore and people on the shore are throwing out to the
I was
boat.
just thinking that, Corey.
But
Yep.
you know, it's really about how you're presenting it across that structure, whether that's a drop, whether that's a piece of woody debris, whether that's a rock, whatever that is. You know, that's kind of the critical part of fishing is getting that bait in front of that fish and it
Right.
looking about as natural as it can look. You know, if it doesn't look natural, then they're probably not going to bite it. They're probably going to be like, that's fake.
Right. But again, if you're pond fishing, that stick style bait
Oh yeah,
is hard to beat.
it is. It really is. Yeah.
I like a green one with a chartreuse tail. Hard to beat. So,
Well,
next
good. Winner.
winner. So our final question, and this is a unique one, so I decided to pick it. Our man, Mr. Caleb, he lives in Zebulon in Wake County, and he is trying hard. He's been trying for 2 years to catch a pickerel. And
He might be in the wrong place.
I think he's heard that they're at Robertson Mill Pond, and they probably are.
They probably are.
But he's looking for places to catch pickerel. He also wants to catch a snakehead, which we don't have.
We don't have those, thankfully.
We don't
bring
want to
them.
give him that opportunity.
Don't turn them loose if you have one.
No.
Do not bring them.
Do not.
Blue light special.
Yes, it is the blue light special.
And yeah, they won't give you a warning for that one.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. So there are no snakehead. If you want to catch a snakehead, you got to go to Potomac River. Is probably the closest place for you.
Yes,
And
Yes, thankfully.
do not bring them back. We
Do
don't
not.
want them.
we do not want them. But pickerel, on the other hand, so we have two species. We got chain and red fins. I think we're probably dominated by chains. I don't see a lot of red fins, but I see a lot of chains.
They're around.
They like really grassy habitats, so that to be the first thing to look
Swampy,
for.
grassy.
The sandhills is not swampy, but the sandhills is acidic like swamps are, and so that's Troy already mentioned that the sandhills are actually pretty good for
pretty good.
pickerel.
Particularly if you're coming from the west. If you want to get to pickerel as soon as you can, hit the sandhills.
Yep,
Unless you're up north.
And I would say there's a lot along the coastal plain. If you get kind of in the backwater areas where there's grassy, whether it's lily pads or
I catch a lot in the back of Hancock Creek.
Yep.
On the noose.
Yeah.
Slocum Creek.
Yeah. That's still fresh water, even though it's in a very salty environment.
the
but
Trent River.
they don't really care about that. I mean, they do care about salt water. They're not going to go in complete salt water, but they will be in brackish water for sure. But yeah, just kind of the backwater areas. Look for places where the water's not really flowing. If it's got grass around it, that is fantastic because that's where they want to be. They like shiny things.
Yeah, spinnerbait.
They love a spinnerbait. They love a buzzbait.
they're an ambush predator. They like to hide, and when something comes by, they come out and hit it.
They really do like shiny baits. They're in that pike family, so they act like northerns and muskies and all that do. They like that shiny, flashy, and they will bite it when you least expect it. As Troy said, you'll be buzzing along and thinking nothing's going on. All of a sudden, some giant animal comes out of the grass patch and attacks your bait. So I caught
it
a
can
bunch.
be very shallow water too.
Yes. I caught a ton of them as a kid on the Neuse River. I mean, it was not. We called them jacks. We didn't call them pickerels.
They're not on his part of the Neuse River.
No, they're not.
much. Unless you're in a real backwater type area. Some of the creeks around Smithfield.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
for the most part, they're going to be further down.
Yeah.
From let's just say Kinston downstream.
Yes, that's correct. And I would say that's true of all of our coastal rivers. They're going to be more. They're middle of the coastal river out
Again, in the tannic,
in the
swampy
tannic,
parts.
swampy type areas.
One of the creeks that's, I'm not necessarily thinking on the news from our sampling, but just from the habitat that I've seen there, would be like Bachelor's Creek.
Oh, I caught a pea out of them in Bachelor's Creek.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. So,
Yeah, that's the. Before you ever said it, I was like Bachelor's Creek. I kept it going in my mind. That's the creek to go to. So yeah, that is definitely
weedy, relatively
clear water. And I will tell you, like Bachelor's Creek in particular is very sinuous.
Right.
It curves on itself a lot. It's crooked. But it has these kind of little in the back part of the crooks. It has these little backwater areas that are kind of off the channel, and that's where the pickerel would be, is in those backwater areas. They wouldn't be right out on the main channel most of the time. You would catch them kind of off the main channel. Is what I found.
Yeah, and there's really nothing they won't eat. But they do like stuff to be moving most of the time.
Yep.
Either topwater or a bait that's just steady moving.
Yeah, I've caught them a lot of different ways, but it's usually been on something that has a spinner attached to it. Even a beetle spin, something that had some kind of flash to it.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I like that question.
Yeah. I thought it was good too. That's why I picked it.
That's why you picked it.
Good job.
Well, we've talked about sunfish in the sand hills, and that's been great. And Troy, thank you for being here. We really enjoyed having you.
Myself, it was a good talk.
Yeah, appreciate you being here.
I'm glad I finally got to check out the studio.
Yeah, got our new studio.
I'll probably be seeing that out of my peripheral vision for like 2 more days.
It does burn.
It's kind of seared in.
It does burn into your retina a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and also one more thing that I need to add.
Yeah.
Fish need water.
I was going to do it before you left. I was like, Ben, remember, fish need water.
That's a good point.
So
I don't know if I'd heard it put that succinctly.
It's true. It's true.
And it makes a lot of sense.
Fish need water, and don't move stuff around.
Yep.
You got to drive that home because that's important. So
we appreciate y'all listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks a lot.